Okay, hi, welcome back. Another video. I'm gonna do sorry, my dog is whining like a little baby for no reason. He's 2 feet away from me right now, and just, if you can hear that, I'm sorry. I'm sorry because I truly am at a loss for what to do about it. It is the middle of June, which means we're like halfway through the year, which means it's time for the mid-year book freakout tag, which I have loved watching everybody's videos that get posted. And so I thought it was time for me to post my own. So post my own. Okay, number 1, the best book you have read in 2022. I've read 30 books so far this year. Did I also just do a video wrap up talking about the 30 books I've read this year? Yes. So there's not gonna be a whole lot of new information, but that's okay. Some of the best books I've read this year. So the newest one I just finished a couple days ago, and it is a new favorite. I'm obsessed with it, and that is Motherhood by Sheila Heti. Oh my God, this book is so good. It's such a banger. It is, I think autofiction is what it could be referred to as, and it's basically about our narrator who is contemplating whether or not she wants to have kids and become a mom. And it basically just goes through like every thought she has around motherhood and child rearing, and it's funny and it's dark and it asks questions that there's like, as somebody that doesn't have children, questions that there's maybe like shame around in the asking. And so I just like devoured it in like a day. It's so readable. It's so good. It really packs a punch. So I loved this. This is probably the best book I've read so far this year. I also really loved Mrs. Death, Mrs. Death. I talked about all of these in the last video I posted, but this is about death personified, wanting to have her biography written by somebody named Wolf. Oh, you know what I'm gonna do? Let me see if I can find like a cool excerpt from each of these that'll kind of spice it up a little bit. Okay, so here's a little excerpt from Motherhood. Besides, there are so many kinds of life to give birth to in this world, apart from a literal human life. And there are children everywhere, and parents needing help everywhere, and so much work to be done, and lives to be affirmed that are not necessarily the lives we would have chosen had we started again. The whole world needs to be mothered. I don't need to invent a brand new life to give the warming effect to my life I imagine mothering will bring. There are lives and duties everywhere just crying out for a mother. That mother could be you. Okay, go off, sis. Okay, so then here's an excerpt from Mrs. Death, Mrs. Death. That your great-grandparents made your grandparents and they made it, or at least survived long enough to make your parents, and that those two got together and made you, to get you here, to this moment, to this page, to live here today and right now, to read this, to hear this. Come on, it is amazing. It is amazing. Your ancestors survived so much so you could survive so much. So say thank you, thank you, thank you. Look at yourself and recognize that you are here and now because they were there and then. Thank you. Living is not as easy as they all make it seem. It is not as simple as breathe in and breathe out. It is not as simple as sleep, eat, work, repeat, sleep, eat, work, repeat. It is not as easy as they all make it look. You made it today. You made it this far. Well done, you, and thank you. Thank you. Thank yourself. Thank you. Okay. I also want to give a shout out. So these are like 2 new favorites that are 2 of the best books I've read this year. I also want to give a shout out to The Overstory by Richard Powers, because this book is crazy. This book is crazy. It's so good. I didn't give it 5 stars, but I think about it so much that it might end up being a 5-star, and I have, just tabs galore on this guy. So those are the 3 best books I've read this year, I think. Okay, next, best sequel you've read this year. Well, I've only read a handful of sequels. I'm not loving A Court of Thorns and Roses, but I did like A Court of Wings and Ruin better than A Court of Mist and Fury. But I wouldn't say that that makes it the best sequel I've read this year. I'm gonna have to give it to, I guess it goes to Anne of Avonlea, which is the second Anne of Green Gables book. It didn't give me the Gilbert Blythe and Shirley content I wanted. I'm still waiting on that, but it was like wholesome, reliable. You can count on it every time that it's just going to be very sweet, very endearing, very wholesome. And those are great books to read like before you go to bed, because they just kind of help you like wind down from the day and escape to this like idyllic, beautiful little town. Yeah, so Anne of Avonlea was the best sequel I read this year. Okay, new release you haven't read yet but want to. Okay, so this is kind of a lie because I technically started it, but that is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This came out this year. It's Emily Henry's third rom-com. I've given her other 2 books 5 stars. I loved Beach Read. I love People We Meet on Vacation. And this is about like books and book lovers, and our main character is like a literary agent. And so I think it'll be a lot of fun. I am not very far in at all. It's longer than I expected. It does go over 300 pages, which why would a romance need to be more than 300 pages is kind of my philosophy, but you know, I'm ready to be wrong. And I don't know, it's gotten a lot of the reviews I've seen have been really hit or miss. Like people either really love it or they like DNF it and hate it. So I'm excited to see what I think. Okay, next, my most anticipated release for the second half of the year has definitely got to be The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. I have pre-ordered this book. I love Maggie O'Farrell. I have read a little bit of her backlist. Hamnet was historical. This Must Be the Place was contemporary, and then there was her memoir. So those are the books that I've read by her. And while I did enjoy This Must Be the Place, and I thought it was really good, I'm so excited to get like another historical from Maggie O'Farrell, because I just think it's gonna be, I'm so excited. I'm going on vacation in September, and it is supposed to deliver like the day before I go on vacation. So I'm really hoping that I get it in time to read it by the pool. Yeah, so that is like, I don't really keep track of a lot of new releases, but that is a book that I'm like, I've already paid for it. I can't wait for it to get here. I'm really, really excited for that one. Okay, next is my biggest disappointment so far of the year, and I think it's The Poppy War. Not even so much that I didn't enjoy it, but I was like really ready to like fall in love and like get really absorbed in the world and like get into a fantasy trilogy. Like I really wanted that for myself, and this just didn't give it to me. I read it and it was fine. It was kind of a slog, and I'm not gonna read the rest of the series. So it was a little disappointing in that respect. And I guess that makes it the biggest disappointment of the year. So my biggest surprise of the year, surprising for a lot of reasons, mainly that I actually read it, is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I don't know if we can like fully understand how ginormous and massive this book is. It's like 800 something pages, and I read it pretty recently actually, and I really enjoyed it. For being an 800 page book, it like really flowed for me. I was like into the characters, the world building was super strong, and I was like totally bought into it. It is a standalone, which I think is like helpful for me, because then it's like the end is in sight, and I know that I'm not going to be like left hanging needing to pick up another book. So that was just surprising for me that I was able to like do that. I was also very surprised by The Starless Sea and how much I enjoyed it by Erin Morgenstern. Hey buddy. Hi. We're filming a video right now, okay? Can I do that? Can I just have a moment of peace? Would that be okay? Okay. What was I saying? What was being said here? yeah, I was really surprised by The Starless Sea. I read this for a book club that I had with my friends Madison and McCarley. For a book club read, you know, when it's like an obligatory read like that, sometimes you never know like if it's gonna end up paying off or not. But this, like, I thoroughly enjoyed like every minute of reading this book. I loved the atmosphere. I loved like the flowery lyrical writing, and there were a lot of moments that I like really enjoyed and loved, and I wasn't expecting it. And then another one that I was really truly very surprised by was Motherhood. I picked this up just like at the recommendation of a couple of booktubers that I really like. Lena Norms is a big fan of this book. Ariel Bissett is a big fan of this book. Jalen from The Bar and the Bookshelf is a huge fan, and so I finally ordered it on Book Depository to get this cover because I think this cover is pretty cool. I was just like, we'll see. It sounded interesting, but I didn't know if the format would be like compatible, like would work for me, but it did. And I was like, I read it in like a day. Like, I couldn't put it down. I couldn't stop highlighting, underlining, tabbing. It's like so good. Okay, next, my favorite new author. I don't know if I could call them a favorite, but like, I have got to read more Sheila Heti. Like, I have got to pick up her newest release, Pure Color. It's calling my name. And so I'm really, really keen to read more of her work. I would also say the same goes to Susanna Clark, who wrote Piranesi, which I like super enjoyed. I'm really interested to read more of her work. I think her other work is like very large. It's like a tome. I think it's called Dr. Strange and Mr. No, not Dr. Strange. Dr. Strange and Mr. Norrell, something like that. So I want to read more from Susanna Clark, and then I also want to read more from Erin Morgenstern, the author of The Starless Sea. I know that The Night Circus is like also super popular and has like a cult following for many of the same reasons that I love The Starless Sea. So those are three authors that I've been introduced to this year that I am like really excited to read more from. Okay, next, new fictional crush. Gilbert Blythe and Shirley is my OTP, and he's a fictional crush, but aside from, I'm hopeful for Charlie from Book Lovers. He's got quite a following, so I'm very hopeful for the crushability there. But aside from that, no fictional crushes to be found. And then for my new favorite character, I think I really, really liked Piranesi, the title character of the book Piranesi. They were like so lovable and innocent and pure, and that's really the only character I can think of. Although there are like a ton of lovable characters, I think Piranesi really stood out for me. The next one is a book that made you cry. I read a lot of sad books. I feel like most of my books are like very, on the story graph, my little chart, it's like the books you read are emotional and reflective and dark and whatever. Tense, sad, but I don't think I've cried at any of the books I've read this year. I think maybe crying in H Mart, I teared up a little bit, but y'all, I've been too busy crying about other stuff to cry about books. Too dark. Okay. A book that made me happy. I really liked Tin Man. This book, now this is a sad book as well, but there are there are parts of it that are just so tender and sweet and endearing and like really, really just like sweet is the only word I can think of. And like, it's not like jubilant, but there is like this like quiet happiness and contentment in this book that I really, really loved. And look at that, I mean, gorgeous cover. So I think Tin Man is a book that made me happy. Okay, next is the most beautiful book you bought this year. I bought this edition of Crime and Punishment. Am I ever gonna read this book is the real question. Because look at this gorgeous edition. I'm obsessed. Look how fat this, I don't know if you can see, there are a couple tabs. I tried to start. This is a big undertaking. This is no small feat. Translated Russian literature that is 500 pages. I was a little ambitious. I bought it for the cover, that's for sure. Is this Penguin? These vintage classics of Russian classics are like breathtaking. I think it's so beautiful. Okay, and then lastly, what do you need to read by the end of the year? I'm trying not to put pressure on myself to read. I have read less this year than I did last year. Been a lot going on. Just off the top of my head, a couple books that I really, really want to read. First is Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. This is like, I currently have a job that is kind of menial and like, it's kind of like a convenience store woman. And so I am hoping to read this book to kind of get a little comfort, get a little solidarity. But it's about this woman that basically like works in a convenience store and is like, yeah, I love it. Like, I like love working in a convenience store. I don't need grand ambitions. And it is translated from Japanese, I believe, which I would really like to read more translated fiction. So this is at the top of my list. I also have a classic that I think I read in high school and I haven't read since then, but that's Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. Gross. Like classic anti-war sci-fi book, but I'm just like really, really keen to read this. And then speaking of hoping to get into a fantasy trilogy, I really want to read City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I'm hopeful that like this will be the one that I'm like, oh, do you know what I want? When I was a youth and I read like the Twilight series and I like was so enthralled and it had me in such a chokehold that I was like, oh my God, I cannot wait to read the next book. That I want that feeling again. Like I want a series and a world and characters where I'm just like, ooh, I want to read the next part. So maybe no pressure, but maybe this will do that for me. I also have like a growing stack of nonfiction that I am not reading at the same rate as my fiction. Like it is growing at the same rate, but it is not getting read at the same rate. So I need to read some more nonfiction. I was trying to get through Braiding Sweetgrass, but it made me want to quit my job, and that's a dangerous side effect for a book to have. So I had to DNF that. But I am right now reading, so I've got 4 books I'm in the middle of. I'm reading Book Lovers. I just started that last night. I'm reading The Interestings by Meg Wolitzer, which is like literary. I'm also slowly making my way through an Indian classic, Thomas, which is translated from Hindi. Taking my time with that. And then I'm reading a nonfiction by Natalie Haynes, who wrote 1,000 Ships, which was one of my favorite like Greek mythology retellings, like ancient Greek retellings. And it's about women in Greek mythology. So those are the 4 books I'm kind of like taking my time reading through. So those are the books I've got to read, and that's my little mid-year book freakout tag. So I would love to hear what you're reading. Would love to hear if you've read any of the books I mentioned and feel similarly or different. And yeah, thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.